Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media, and welcome to the Tuesday night edition of our program. We're live, we're national, it's 7 minutes past the hour. The phone number here, if you want to join me, feel free, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And China holding strong with their suspension of rare earth minerals. Now they're holding up shipments of Boeing products, trying to cripple the United States. Will it work? I doubt it, but that's what's going on there. Plus, you've got Honda relocating plants from Mexico and Canada into the United States and agreeing to make 90% of all U.S. cars within the United States. Ain't that something? Plus, we're going to get into some other stuff here. A little bit on what is going on with the Zuckerberg trial, Meta, which is being looked at for overstepping in buying Instagram and WhatsApp and whatnot. They've been getting grilled on Capitol Hill. And then the New York Times has a piece about ADHD, and there's been a lot of reaction to it, and a new study also that's recently out, where some people are saying, we knew it, the whole thing was a scam. And I can just tell you, then you can call it something else, but there's something wrong with me, and that's for sure. So we're going to get into that as well. But I want to jump into this story that I saw this morning that I thought was really interesting, because there's never a shortage of drama, right? The feds have arrested a guy for threatening to do what? Assassinate Tulsi Gabbard and her husband. Tulsi Gabbard, Lieutenant Colonel Gabbard, who is now the Director of National Intelligence in the Trump administration, was apparently the target. And federal authorities arrested this guy for threatening to assassinate her and her husband. The Department of Justice announced charges against Ali Akbar Mohammed Amin, 24 years old, from Lilburn, Georgia. He allegedly sent threatening text messages about Gabbard and her husband, Abraham Williams, between March 29th and April 1st, according to a report from NBC. Here's what he said. Prepare to die, Tulsi, you and everyone you hold dear, one of the texts read, according to the release from NBC. America will burn. Living on borrowed time, and he warned her that her home is a legitimate target and will be hit at a time and place of their choosing. In a text sent to her husband, according to a complaint that was filed by federal prosecutors, Mr. Amin said, tell your wife to always be on her best behavior and not to disobey Mr. Vladimir Putin's orders. We are friendly bears, and then he put the Russian flag plus the bear emoji. But we can also be angry bears. Unbelievable. And 5-0, the feds, they say that they also found threatening messages on his social media accounts. One image showed a gun pointed at Gabbard. Law enforcement found a firearm in Mr. Amin's home. Another message read, you and your family are going to die soon, and I will personally do the job if necessary. This sounds like a disgruntled weirdo. Doesn't sound like an assassin, but I guess it doesn't take much, right? And again, this guy, his name, Ali Akbar Mohammed Amin, arrested for talking about killing Tulsi Gabbard and sending a threatening text to her husband. Alexa Henning is Gabbard's chief of staff. She said on Twitter, that everybody else calls X, that she had told CNN that Gabbard had credible active threats against her and her family, and that they went ahead and doxed her address anyway. And I'm looking at the tweet here. It says, I told CNN that Tulsi Gabbard had credible active threats. They went to get doxed her anyway. This is a retweet from FBI Atlanta. So this comes after police arrested a Wisconsin teen for allegedly murdering his parents before plotting to assassinate President Trump. And this 17-year-old Wisconsin teenager who's been charged with the murders of his mother and stepfather allegedly plotted to assassinate President Donald Trump and incite a political revolution. Federal authorities claim the boy authored a 3-page document titled Accelerate the Collapse, and that called for the assassination of Trump by making bombs and Vice President J.D. Vance as well. According to the Waukesha County authorities, Nikita Kassap had messages and images on his phone referencing a manifesto that outlined plans to get rid of the president and perhaps the vice president. The document stated that the attack would be guaranteed to bring in some chaos and made clear that the plot specifically targeted former President Donald Trump. Prosecutors are now weighing charges including conspiracy, attempted presidential assassination, and the use of weapons of mass destruction. How about that? That's what's going on there. And the story goes on, but you get the gist of it already. There's some whack jobs out there, and they're doing their thing. Apparently, there's going to be a White House Correspondents' Dinner, and Trump isn't going. I think he did the same thing last time, and that was funny. Right? They were like, who does this guy think he is? Anyway, good for him. He keeps sending a very strong message to the media, and that's the way you have to do it. You've got to send a message that, look, we're not going to play ball. We're not going to play your game, so that they can play fair, because they don't want to play fair. The White House is asking Congress to cut $9.3 billion for PBS and USAID. This is interesting, right? Because all the rest of us, like my friends, my colleagues, earlier today I was on with Chris Salcedo at WSEV. Shout out to him, Newsmax. And we were talking about how in order for us to be on the radio and do whatnot, we have to play in the commercial world, right? Ads are sold, there's endorsement spots, stuff like that. But that's how this works. But that's not how it works for PBS or NPR. They get their public funding, and then some of that public funding goes to nonprofits that turn around and go ahead and donate it in other ways right back. So, I mean, it's a pretty big number that they get, despite what they claim to get directly. There's an indirect portion. And, of course, then there's some mega donors as well that get into that. So, you know who's not involved? The listeners, the people. They don't vote with their dollars. They don't say, you know what, I like this guy, I like this product, I'm going to support this show. Let me buy this. They don't do that. You have to hear what they're saying, or just don't listen. And I've always thought that model was like kind of suspect. It costs you money to get your information on the airwaves, whereas in our model, we make money putting our ideas on the airwaves. To me, that sounds a lot better, right? Right. Anyway. There is a whole lot more I want to get into straight ahead. We're going to have a conversation on several topics, not the least of which I mentioned before, ADHD. Some are saying there's brand new information. Some are saying it's fake, phony, and fraud. I'll be the first one to say that's a lie. But there's more. There's Mark Zuckerberg. There's what's going on with his antitrust case. And China blocking exports of rare earth minerals, and Honda relocating plants from Canada and Mexico into the interior of the United States and committing to making 90% of U.S. cars right here in the good old U.S. of A. So keep it locked right here. We're going to have those conversations, plus your calls, your thoughts, your opinions on everything that's going on. There was some clarification today from the White House on what they discussed yesterday at the meeting with President Bukele. We covered all that stuff live last night, but they doubled down on it in the White House today with the White House press secretary just reiterating the case. And I think it couldn't be any clearer. But still, MSNBC and CNN could probably still mess it up. So keep it locked right here. We're coming right back. Your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Beijing has begun restricting the export of a number of what are these so-called rare earth minerals. Since early April, 6 heavy rare earth metals have been able to be shipped out of Chinese ports only with a special export license. The New York Times reporting that the government has only just begun setting up a system to issue such licenses. Also restricted from export are special magnets made from those metals, 90% of which are produced in China. Such metals and magnets are ubiquitous in many kinds of electric motors. They're used in cars, drones, missiles, and microchips themselves. Shortages of them could halt production at U.S. automotive factories rather quickly. Rare earth minerals are a sort of ace up China's sleeve in the escalating trade battle. They represent a relatively small proportion of the country's exports, but they are crucial for the supply chains of other nations.
So that is Brian Quinn from France 24 with that report. And China seems to be trying to throw a monkey wrench in our gears here, right? Well, I want to get to the bottom of this with somebody who knows what's going on. He's Executive Director of Consumer Research, Will Hild. Welcome back.
Great to be with you again.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And I want to get into this with you because I think it's, par for the course, right? We're in a trade war, and if we've got something that they want and they've got something we want, then we're going to work hard to make sure the other doesn't get it until the negotiations are complete. But what type of impact do you think this is going to have? And I don't mean short term, like, production may stop and things may not be available and prices may go up, but long-term impact. Is this something we won't be able to source ever again in the United States?
No, I don't believe that's the case. The thing is that these rare earth metals are actually found across the entire globe. They're really not that rare. It's actually kind of a cliche joke about rare earths. Is the thing about them is they're not that rare. What's rare, the leverage point that China has, is that because of prohibitive environmental controls here in the United States, and the fact that we've pushed so much of our industrial strength overseas, there is no refining of these metals here in the United States. China has cornered the market in the refining of these metals. And so we're going to have to, long term, bring that back home to either here in the United States or at least a partner like Mexico or Canada who we have access to geographically and is closer to us geopolitically than obviously China, our newly minted frenemy, has become. So this is a long-term solvable problem, absolutely. It is the consequence of a number of different policy failures from past administrations, but also Wall Street, which was all too happy to source the lowest cost place to put all this stuff. But as we're seeing, the price of something and the cost can be two different things. And it may have been low prices, but it was very high cost because we're now in a tough position.
Now, this is, to me, a pretty commonsensical thing. But we went through this when COVID happened. And it was not because of a trade war as much as it was people were dead and people were sick and people were quarantined. And we didn't have access to things. Cars took forever to get. There were chip shortages all over the place and medication shortages. What do you think is the biggest barrier that's in the way of us acting on the lesson that we should have learned way back when?
Well, that's a great question, and I would say it's probably a tie between the environmental protections that I think are so excessive. You can't have environmental protections that are so excessive that you can't have an industrialized nation, right? I can tell you, it doesn't matter how nice the environment is. If we're all living in trees, it's not going to go well. So we have to be able to do basic things. And to tell you the truth, we have our industry here in the United States is the most environmentally friendly production in the entire globe. China pollutes way more than anything in the United States, either that exists or could exist, because we are just so much better and so much more careful in our manufacturing and our refining.
And we follow the rules that we make.
One big obstacle. Exactly, all the rules that we make. So we're going to have to bring that home. The other problem we haven't talked about yet is during that COVID period, in that time when we should have been learning all these lessons, you had Wall Street asset managers like BlackRock and Larry Fink that I've talked about many times on this show, but others like State Street and Vanguard that were pushing down corporate America's throat these ESG standards. And ESG stands for environmental, social governance. Their billed as by the supporters as an investment strategy. But really what it is a far left progressive agenda being pushed, not through the ballot box, but through Wall Street. And the net of it is, the short version is, that is another reason why a lot of these companies that saw this coming, that said, hey, look, oh my gosh, COVID has shown us that these supposedly robust, invincible supply chains could disappear tomorrow if something were to go wrong. Let's bring that here. Well, the ESG pushers like BlackRock would punish those companies for doing that. They punish their executives. They threaten their board members. In fact, in the case of Exxon, they replaced 3 of them because they weren't doing Larry Fink's bidding, the CEO of BlackRock. So that's another thing that needs to be removed. And I'm glad to say that since the election, a lot of the banks and the asset managers that were pushing that stuff have started to ease off. But it's still not over yet, and we need to keep pushing on Wall Street. I hope that the Trump administration will not only clear the bureaucratic hurdles that come from the government, but they will also clear these Wall Street hurdles. None of this, what BlackRock was doing, is legal, and they need to be made to answer for that, and it needs to be clear that that is never going to happen again. And,
Will, what's funny here to me is that China championed this whole net zero initiative along with BlackRock coming on later on as like a U.S. partner. And voila, China bails out, BlackRock bails out. Nobody's part of the net zero initiative anymore. It just smacks of so much hypocrisy.
That's exactly right. And it was always a really cynical play on China's part, because what they really wanted is for the United States to unilaterally deindustrialize while China's emissions skyrocketed, which is what happened. Right. What happened. Ours plateaued, started to decline. UK, another country that's monomaniacally fixated on hitting net zero, they're like 3% of emissions. We're like 10 or 15. I have to go look it up. China has gone from being almost nothing to nearly the majority of the world's emissions, and they're skyrocketing. They have absolutely no plans to stop. They're building 100 coal plants a year. So the idea that we need to hit net zero while China skyrockets in emissions, it's absurd, and it is always a cynical play by them. That President Trump called the China hoax. That's what he meant by that, is that this was always a cynical play to get us to fight with one arm tied behind our back economically. And so we just need to scrap the whole thing. It's based on ridiculous, faulty science. As we've seen time and time again, experts have lied to us to feather their own nest. This is another example of that, but they've been in bed with China. BlackRock, our first campaign against BlackRock was actually BlackRock Loves China, because they've been in bed together so long.
I love it. Folks, we're on with Will Hild. He is the executive director of Consumer Research. Check out consumerresearch.org. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what couldn't be done. They said, no way you're going to make Japanese cars in the United States. Well, Honda's now committed to making 90% of their cars in the U.S., and they're shutting down or moving their operations from Mexico and Canada right into the U.S. of A. We're coming right back with Will Hild from Consumers Research. Don't go anywhere.
Listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
This is all based on a report out of Japan. A newspaper there is saying that Honda is considering shifting 90% of production to serve the U.S. market to the United States in response to auto tariffs. This is, of course, creating a lot of anxiety here in Ontario. Honda's plants in Alliston, just outside of Barrie, they employ 4,200 people. This morning, the Premier says that he spoke with the head of Honda Canada, who shared that the reports are not accurate. But Doug Ford didn't say exactly what's next for the automaker. He's leaving it to the company to clarify that.
We're going to keep Honda here. and I'll do everything I can to protect the people and their jobs. And that's what this throne speech is all about today, is making sure that we protect people's jobs, protect communities and businesses right across the province. We have to streamline processes to make sure we're more competitive around the world, attract new companies here. And that's exactly what our throne speech is and the mandate that people gave me after the election.
I'm Siobhan Morris.
That is the report from Canada's CTV. And I just have to point out, that Doug Ford, that's the same Doug Ford that was beating on his chest saying, I will shut the lights off in the U.S. We're going to make it painful for the Americans. Right? It was like watching WWE. And I was waiting for Hulk Hogan to come in and rip his shirt off and wave the American flag. This Doug Ford, he's something else. He's pretty funny, in my opinion. I want to bring in Will Hild. He's Executive Director of Consumers Research, consumersresearch.org. Will, what do you think is the play here? Is this a squeeze play on Canada? I think they're just squeezing Canada out. And as much as they want to have their people building Japanese cars that come to the U.S., that game seems to be over per Trump's tariff strategy. Your thoughts?
Yes, I would say so. And I'll just note really quickly, people may recall that it was actually Ford's brother who used to have his position before he died of cancer. And, he was infamous. He got caught smoking crack on video many times. And it would appear Canada, that region has somehow downgraded. They've gotten the worse Ford brother now because at least that guy wasn't destroying industry in Canada with arrogance and, like you said, chest thumping. Canada has been, in some ways, twice or three times as suicidal to its own industry as America has. I talked in the last segment about the things that we've done to make it very difficult to produce things like, refined rare earth minerals here in the United States. Well, right. Canada is that on steroids. Even the net zero stuff, they were threatening to pass a net zero tax that would have been an absolute nuke to basically all of their production in that country. I think even Mark Carney has walked that back now in the middle of this tariff stuff. They realize that they can't afford that kind of nonsense. But absolutely, I think Canada is in a real tough position here because they sort of, racing, they call it, I think, drifting off of somebody where you stay behind them and you don't have to deal with the same wind forces that they do. Well, Canada has basically drifted off us economically. And I think that is what Trump is talking about when he talks about, them having an unfair trade deal with us is they don't have to pay for their military because they're protected by us. They don't have to attract industry in the same way, but people, because they're close.
And they're trying to build cars that they're not selling to Canadians. They're selling them to us.
Exactly. They're selling them to us. So I think that's really what Trump's tariff war with Canada is about, is saying, listen, you're not going to draft off us anymore. You're actually going to have to pay your own way on these things and pay us for the privilege of protecting you with the world's largest military and pay us for the privilege of access to our markets, which is why anyone wants to build anything in your country anyway. So I think this is probably going to be par for the course for both Canada and Mexico for the foreseeable future.
Now, how do we, and this is a little bit outside of your, your expertise as a consumer research guy, but from a political perspective, and I know you have thoughts on this stuff, it seems like that's part of this that we have to manage as well to make sure we don't create enemies of our neighbors. That, we kind of have to make sure, as my friends in the mob would say, wet their beaks. If they don't wet their beaks, they're going to get really thirsty.
Yeah, that's a great question. And obviously that is the big question mark standing over Trump's tariff policy. We basically did away with tariffs in the earliest 20th century. They had, as Trump likes to always bring up, they had typified our tax and industrial policy basically from the beginning of the nation. And then we put them away basically for geopolitical reasons, both in World War I and World War II. And so the question is, if we bring them back, do we have similar prosperity that we had back when we used them? And I think that's a real question. And I think it does come down to how we navigate this stuff. I think you raise a good point. We don't want to make the tariff so high that, Canada comes to resent us and doesn't even want to be near us anymore. Not that they can move, but obviously
there's a lot of things they can open their arms to China.
Well, that is the big concern. I think that's a great point, which is we're going to have to watch for that. In some ways, part of the concern is they already have.
Right.
Canada has been moving very close to China. I think that's one of the things that the administration is very frustrated with. Is it's one thing to say to draft off us economically, benefit from access to our markets and their proximity to us, and not having to pay for military, and just say, hey, look, it's good to be the little brother, right? You don't have to do the work the same way the United States does. It's another thing to go cozy up to our enemy at the same time that you're benefiting from all these things. And so I think a lot of the consternation and frustration with Canada is well earned. And even the fact that they appointed Mark Carney, not to get too in the weeds here, but I do think your listeners appreciate sort of the negative serendipity of this. Mark Carney's last job was running the Net Zero Alliance, the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. That thing you talked about, BlackRock and all the banks leaving, That's what he was in charge of. So they have appointed a lunatic. I mean, I thought Justin Trudeau was a lunatic. They have appointed an absolute madman to run their country, at least until the next election. The polling looks like they might pick him again. So I can understand why the administration would not view them as the ally that Canada has normally been viewed as.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Will, excellent analysis. Thanks for shedding light on this. Tell everybody that's listening how they can learn more about the work that you guys are doing and what they can expect from you guys at consumersresearch.org.
Absolutely. Well, we are the point of the spear pushing back against BlackRock and ESG. The fight's not over. We've had a lot of victories, but we've got to finish the job so this stuff can't come back. So people can learn more at consumersresearch.org. That's consumersresearch.org. And they can follow our fight on Twitter if they'd like to follow me, at Will Hild. That's WILLHILD on X, formerly known as Twitter.
Outstanding. Will Hild, Executive Director at Consumers Research. You heard the website, consumersresearch.org. He knows what he's talking about. He's got his finger on the pulse. I appreciate it, brother. You're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. And amigos, we go to your thoughts, calls, and reactions to all of this, plus a few more things I've got up my sleeve. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
You're the only one that's asked me that. Oh, I deal with all these big financial geniuses. Nobody ever. There is a chance that the money from tariffs could be so great that it would replace. In the old days, about 1870 to 1913, the tariffs were the only form of money. And that's when our nation was relatively the richest. We were the richest.
That is Trump on Fox Noticias, where the reporter asked him if tariffs would replace the income tax. And, of course, he's alluded to that many times, calling it the External Revenue Service, and the Secretary of Commerce alluding to replacing the IRS with the ERS. And leave it to the intrepid reporter on Fox Noticias to ask President Trump this big question. And I think these are part of Trump's big and lofty goals. And what's cool about Trump is that oftentimes he gets to achieve his big and lofty goals, even if he doesn't, hit every part of it, right? I always find it interesting when people say, well, Trump said, I'm going to build a wall, and Mexico's going to pay for it. And all they could do was talk about and who paid for it. You paid for it. We paid for it. The taxpayers paid for it. Well, there was really no expectation, I think, that Mexico was going to pay. I mean, why would I believe that, right? Oh, so you think Trump's a liar? No. I think Trump was, alluding to the idea that they're going to pay for it. One way or another, they're going to pay for it. And they did. When he put together USMCA, he figured out a way to get some money out of them. And he does it all the time. He's doing it daily. On a daily basis, he shows us how he's going to make other people pay for stuff. Got it. Understood. I see how it is. And what amazes me is how others don't see it. But all that being said, I think it would be a very grand idea to get rid of the IRS. And I'm a step further. I also think we could get rid of a lot of these tariffs. Where would we get the money from, Rich? Now we're talking. Now we're talking about a couple of different options. They're not interchangeable, but the flat tax, there's the fair tax. Very similar. National sales tax is another option that's similar to either. And again, not interchangeable. They're not all the same. They all have their nuance, but these are all ways that you could generate some money based on consumption. I like that plan. I think the tariff plan is one that a lot of people like because it gives you a chance to get by. What do I mean? Let's say what Trump is saying here, right? And what he's saying is true, right? Between 1870 and 1913, the United States' primary source of revenue was tariffs. Tariffs being paid by American importers, American citizens that wanted to bring things into this country from another place, paying the tariff to bring things into the country. Got it. Which many argue gets passed on to the end user. Okay, that's fine. Maybe, and I argue that doesn't always seem to be the case, right? It may not always equate that way. But all that being said, let's just say that is exactly how it goes. And I'll use my Ferrari example again, and I'll use my Argentinian Malbec example again. If I like wine from Argentina, which I do, and I want to buy an Italian sports car, and I have to pay more for each of them because I like them, I'm probably going to pay more for each of them. Not because I have tons of money and I can afford. The first question is, can I afford it? If I can't, then that's it. I'm not doing that. I'm buying a Corvette in the USA, and I'm going to buy me a California Red, maybe a Cabernet Sauvignon from the Napa Valley, maybe one of the Trump vineyards in Virginia, and I'm going to call it a day, right? America first. But if you have a penchant, a particular proclivity for something foreign, do you, man? Yeah, I'm not mad at you. You're paying the premium to get it here. But the way you get away with this is, or the way you get by or get over, is just buy American. America first. Buy the Corvette. I've been doing it for years. And let me tell you, I once had an Acura, which now we know they're making a lot of the Honda cars here, 90% of them. So that opens up a whole new market. But it was one of my favorite cars. I had an Acura TL. Fast, smooth, sleek, real nice. I don't know, 10 years ago maybe. And I really enjoyed that car. Otherwise, I drive American SUV. Ford, GMC, that type of thing. And I love it. So what am I saying? If I wanted a foreign car, like my buddy loves to drive BMW. He's got an electric BMW. This thing flies. Let me tell you something. When there's no combustion engine and you hit the accelerator on an electric car, you get whiplash in that bad boy. Your head goes right to the back seat. The front of that car pops up and you're out. I mean, it's fast. Now, there might be other caveats of having an electric car, but pickup is not one of them. You don't have to wait for the combustion at all. There's no need for the exhaust to get from the front to the back. That thing just flies. And he loves them. This is his second one. I doubt he'll ever buy anything else. So if there's a tariff on that, he'll pay the tariff. He'll probably buy a more affordable model, or he'll save up, go without on something else just to be able to afford it because he loves that car. And he loved the last one. So what's the point I'm making? If you don't want to be like my buddy, then you go ahead and you do the American version, right? You find the car that you like that's American, or the Honda that's built and made in USA. Get the made in the USA car, and that's it, and call it a day. And then you don't have to deal with any tariff. You don't have to deal with any increases being passed on to the consumer. Don't buy those goods. But Rich, don't you realize if I buy made in America, I'm already paying more? Are you? Right? You're going to tell me that it doesn't cost more to buy a Honda than a Ford? Of course. There's a lot of things that you can get made in the USA that are more affordable. So this whole idea that we have to produce it overseas because it's so ridiculously cheap, I mean, that's true today, but it won't be true forever. I haven't bought, well, let me take this back. Up until about a month ago, I did buy a pair of sneakers. They were on sale, and I liked them. But prior to that, since the take a knee controversy and Mr. Colin Kaepernick, all that, whatever year that was, 2018 maybe, since then, I have not bought a Nike product. I have some. I have a couple of gym shirts. Every time I wear one in a video or something, and somebody sees it, they're like, oh, come on, man. Why are you wearing that? Point is, buy American, avoid the tariffs. That's simple. I'll be right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
First of all, President Bukele said that he is not going to smuggle a foreign terrorist back into the United States of America, as many in this room in the Democrat Party seemingly want him to do. Abrego Garcia was a foreign terrorist. He is an MS-13 gang member. He was engaged in human trafficking. He illegally came into our country.
Illegally came into the country. That's Caroline Leavitt. And she says there's nowhere to go but to get deported. Whether it happens sooner than later, it was always going to be the end result. Caroline Leavitt at today's White House press briefing regarding Mr. Garcia, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who is considered by the United States courts a foreign terrorist, part of MS-13, which is now an FTO, foreign terrorist organization. She says he was never going to live a peaceful life in Maryland. I want to get your thoughts on this. Let's go to Eduardo. Eduardo is calling us from Tampa, Florida, WSKY. Go right ahead, my man.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. Well, it's embarrassing that Senator Chris Van Hollen from Maryland is going to be taking probably a taxpayer flight over to El Salvador to put in a good word for Mr. Garcia. That's embarrassing.
Yeah, tell me more.
Yeah, well, he's planning on talking, although I don't know why he has to take the flight, because the president of El Salvador is right there in D.C. When he talked to President Trump. So I don't know why he has to go to
Well, he wants to make
El
a
Salvador.
show.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Right. He wants to show off. He wants to let everybody know that he's standing up for what's right in the face of the president of both of these countries. He's clown. He's a clown. I can't imagine anybody other than, maybe one of his counterparts in the Senate of El Salvador, giving him the time of day when he goes there. He's grandstanding, and he's just trying to get some press like everybody else. Eduardo, thank you for the call. I appreciate it. Shout out to everybody listening on richvaldez.com. And amigos, we continue the conversation, so keep it locked right here. We've got others that are on hold. We're going to get to you momentarily. But if it's the end of the road, hasta la próxima. Take care, good night, and God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy to be here with you, and it is our Tuesday night edition of the program. We are live, we are national. Here's the phone number if you want to call us. It is 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And it is 7 minutes past the hour. If you want to join the combo, make sure you just give us a call, 833-4-Valdez. Now, a bunch of things are going on today, but what I wanted to get into, and something that was interesting was, there's a antitrust hearing going on Meta, also known as Facebook, and the allegation is that they grew too big, too fast, whatever and what have you, monopolizing the app game by buying Instagram and WhatsApp. We're going to get into that in a little bit, but I want to start here with where I left off with one of my callers, right? Our buddy Eduardo from Florida, who brought up a point, and he said, what does this guy think? Now, I don't want to join the chorus of people. I want to stay legal because why? Because it's Holy Week, and I want to be a better Christian today than I was yesterday. And I don't want to take joy in a family being ripped apart. I don't want to take joy in anything. Do I want to take joy in a man that was involved with MS-13 being deported? Probably, right? I probably do appreciate the fact that we're one less foreign terrorist having to deal with in our country. But I want to remain sensitive to everything. And he was talking about Van Hollen, right? Senator Van Hollen. And Senator Van Hollen made some comments that were not just silly, but bordering stupid. Listen to this.
You requested this meeting with President Bukele while he's in D.C. Is the meeting set? Have you heard back?
I did request it. I've not heard back from the president of El Salvador. And as I said...
And he's not going to hear back either. Why? Because they think he's a clown. He probably turned to Trump and said, is this guy for real? Is this guy a fake, phony, or fraud, or what? Why is he trying to talk to me, one of your senators here? It has absolutely nothing to do with nothing. Go ahead.
In that letter, if I don't hear from him and Abrego Garcia is not quickly returned, I do intend to go to El Salvador this week to show solidarity with his family. As you indicated, the Trump administration itself has admitted that he was abducted and sent to this prison in error, and he should get his due process. I think that the situation for both the Trump administration and the president of El Salvador is unsustainable because the Supreme Court, as you reported, by 9-0, has said the Trump administration has to facilitate
Hang on right there. Hang on. The Supreme Court by 9-0 has said the Trump administration has to facilitate his return if he is released by El Salvador. Attorney General Bondi said yesterday in front of Caitlin Collins, in front of the entire press gaggle that was there, in front of President Trump, the Secretary of State, the Vice President of the United States. Who else was in there? President Bukele. That was everybody I saw on the screen. There was probably a whole bunch of others I didn't see or off camera. It was very, very clear. She said the court sided with us 9-0 that they were within their rights to deport this person. That's settled because this was going to end up that way. It's acknowledged that there was an administrative, call it a mistake. It wasn't a mistake to deport the guy. It was a mistake to deport him at the time that they did. So he skipped a hearing, and he's entitled to one more hearing so that they can tell him, hey, your asylum has been revoked, it didn't get approved, and you're going to be deported. Now, I don't mean to be flippant. I'm not trying to be mean either. I'm not trying to be like some of the people that are out there saying, you're in this country illegally, you got to be sent home. It's not what I'm saying. Is that what I believe? Likely. But there are plenty of people that are in this country illegally that are not foreign terrorists, and ICE is not going after them, and nobody's trying to deport them. And I make that point a lot because I live in the Northeast, and the odds of, in my lifetime, the odds of me going somewhere and not being impacted by somebody who's in this country illegally is very slim. They make up a huge part of the population, the economy, this, that. I'm not saying we can't survive without them. I'm not saying that. I am saying that these are people that are contributing toward their version of the American dream, in many cases my version of the American dream. And should they have a chance to pay their fine and do what they got to do, they would likely pay whatever they have to pay and contribute, because I think they love this country as much as we do. But the bigger point I'm making here is that this gentleman, who was found by two federal courts, to be involved with MS-13, he wasn't going to get to stay. Now, that's where it ends for me. I don't need to make fun of his wife. I don't need to make fun of him. I don't need to say anything else. But I do have to correct the record for Senator Van Hollen, because he says that the Supreme Court says 9.0 that Trump has to facilitate the return. Yes, if this man is released. The president of El Salvador just said, I'm not releasing anybody. Moreover, he said, how am I going to send him back to your country? I can't deport someone out of my country. Right? He can't deport Salvadorian citizens into America when they're not Americans. You can only repatriate people. So, at least in El Salvador. Now, if Trump is talking about doing that, that's a whole different story. Which I believe is one of those Trumpisms that he uses to just keep the media on their toes, to keep them talking. But outside of that, that's where this whole thing is. And he's trying to paint this picture like it's somehow Trump doing something nefarious. It's not. Go ahead.
You have the president of El Salvador saying, well, I don't have the power to release him. Both things are untrue. The president could, of course, facilitate his return. After all, the United States is paying El Salvador money for this prison. And, of course, the president of El Salvador could release him. So at some point, I think this becomes unsustainable. People are going to keep calling for his release because the Trump administration itself has admitted he was wrongfully whisked out of the country, and we have a 9-0 decision from the Supreme Court.
The 9-0 decision from the Supreme Court supports the Trump administration, sir. Whether he was whisked at the right time or not, he was always going to get whisked. The argument would be, can he sue for damages? Probably. He could probably sue and say, look, you guys cheated me out of another 3-6 months that I could have been in Maryland with my family. And for that, I want damages. Maybe he wins, maybe he doesn't. I don't even know if they could put a case like that together. But can the president of El Salvador release him? Yes, that wasn't the question. The question was, can he send him back? No. He could release him into El Salvador saying, hey, look, we are taking you back. We know that you are gang affiliated and you were just kicked out of another country for being a foreign terrorist. But all that being said, we're going to let you go. Today's your lucky day. It's Easter. We're letting you go. And should you decide to get on that plane and go back to the U.S. for your court date, then that's on you. Do you think the president of El Salvador is going to do that with somebody who is a known member of a foreign terrorist organization? And I keep saying that because this is the reason why he wasn't afforded the due process that everybody's clamoring about. It's the same due process that everybody in Guantanamo Bay has. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and all the rest of these crazies. We didn't sit there and try them in federal court. Actually, some of them we did, right? Obama insisted on that. But outside of that, Bush held them as enemy combatants. Trump is holding these people and deporting them as FTO members, foreign terrorist organization members. So it's a different process that doesn't have the same due process. It makes sense to me. Now, if you want to be a libertarian purist and say, well, I don't like that. You know, like the same people who say the cops can't pull you over, you should be free to travel, no knock warrants are unconstitutional and all that. Go right ahead. Make your arguments, get to the Supreme Court and get them all overturned. But until then, all that stuff remains legal, and I don't see anything happening here. So I think Van Hollen is reaching. Now, who else is out there banging the pots and pans? Well, Mr. Abrego Garcia's wife, Kilmar Abrego Garcia's wife. Her name is Ms. Vasquez, Jennifer Vasquez Sura, I think is her second last name. And she had a press conference today, very well attended, very well covered in the media. Listen to this.
As we continue through Holy Week, my heart aches for my husband, who should have been here leading our Easter prayers. Instead, I find myself pleading with the Trump administration and the Bukele administration to stop playing political games with the life of Kilmer.
So again, that's the wife. And listen, I could not tell you that I don't feel bad hearing that. I'd be lying. I feel very bad hearing that. I'm a softie. I want every dad to be with their kids. I want every kid to be with their dads. I want every husband to be with his wife. I understand this guy's broken some rules and broken some laws, and he's going to have to pay the price in the appropriate place. And he's not going to be able to be in the United States. And if they want to be with him, they might have to go there. You know, I grew up with a friend, a couple of friends, that made bad choices. One of my friends got into quite a life of crime. And upon one of his felony convictions, he did 4 years in jail. And the day he came out of jail, he was deported to Nicaragua. I still talk to him every now and again on Facebook Messenger. And he's made his life out there. And guess what? His dad moved there. His mom moved there. Even for a little while, I think his sister moved there. And then she moved back here, and she just recently got married. And she's starting her own family, and she's here stateside. But the whole family decided to go back because they didn't want to be apart from their adult son. And he came here as an infant and never became a naturalized citizen, although having the opportunity. He was a resident, legal immigration the whole way. None of them were illegal immigrants. They were always legal immigrants. They worked. Dad was an elevator mechanic. Mom was a seamstress in the aforementioned factories that were all over the area I grew up in, textile factories. And I say all of that to say, this family wanted to stay together, and they did. And I admire that. A lot of Hispanic families like to stay together. Family values is a big thing. Grandma never goes to assisted living. Grandpa never goes to the villages, right? They move in with you. They die with you, and that's it. You grow up with your grandparents in the house. It's quite customary for many Hispanics. So I say all of that to say, if this woman wants to be with her family, I think she knows where she needs to be. Is it difficult? I'm sure it is. Do I feel badly? Yes, I do. But I know that I'm not the only one. I went to a Dominican restaurant to get some soup, sancocho. And that's delicious, by the way. And I'm talking to the lady, and she's asking me about the show, and I was telling her we're talking about this topic, and she's like, not for nothing. And people think I'm crazy, but because I'm Hispanic. That's what she tells me. She says, but you know what? I like Trump's politics. She said, you know what? I'm from the Dominican Republic. And she said, in the Dominican Republic, we have a huge immigration problem with Haiti. And they keep coming in, and they keep coming in. And she said, you go to the doctor. God forbid there's an emergency. You go to the emergency room. There's a 3 or 4 hour wait, if they could even see you, because this is the primary source of medical care for the Haitians that are coming into the country illegally, clogging up their healthcare system. And I don't mean to sound crass. I'm just being factual. And I'm telling you what this woman just told me. So it's not a foreign idea. It doesn't matter where you come from. And this lady also, legal immigrant. And the example she made to me was, and I said, look, I feel badly. I told her what I told you. I said, I feel badly. This guy's a dad. He's got a little kid. His wife became a citizen. And she said, look, I don't know what you were doing all day while that lady was there giving her press conference to 1,000 people. She said, but I could tell you I was right here running this restaurant. And she said, if her husband was running a restaurant, he wouldn't be in this problem. Her words, not mine. And I said, ma'am, I stand corrected. I think you're 100% right. Keep it locked right here. We're going to continue the conversation. We're going to find out what's going on with Zuckerberg in this closed hearing, antitrust hearing. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
We are living in a moment where a handful of billionaires control our government. You know, for many years I have been talking about oligarchy in America, and people say, well, you know, Bernie is just giving a speech. But anybody, I have to thank Trump for educating the American people about what oligarchy is. We can talk about it as an abstraction, but when Trump gets inaugurated and standing right behind him, and I had the remarkable, unreal, surreal experience of being in the front row, just like you guys are. I got pushed into that, I don't know how, but there I was. And there's Trump taking the oath of office, and right behind him are the three wealthiest people in America, Mr. Musk, Mr. Bezos, and Mr. Zuckerberg. And if that is not enough to make you understand that we're living in an oligarchy, right behind them were 13 other billionaires that Trump had nominated to head up major federal agencies.
That, of course, Senator Bernie Sanders, healthcare is a right himself. And he's talking about the billionaires and oligarchy, as he says. And he makes the case that a handful of billionaires, and I would make the case that a handful of billionaires control a whole lot of everything everywhere, including the banking system and everything else, right? People with money make the world go round. I get that. But he makes this case, and it's a similar theme to what's going on with Mark Zuckerberg, who's now playing nice as of late because he's in court, right? He's in a trial with the FTC. So I want to bring in our guest who's been patiently standing by. I really want to thank him, Allum Bokhari, Managing Director of the Foundation for Freedom Online. And Allum, we're about to take a pause, but I wanted to introduce you and get everybody ready for what we're about to discuss, because I think this could have major implications. Allum.
Good evening, Rich. Yes, it certainly could, and this antitrust trial could be the most consequential one in a long time.
Well, folks, keep it locked right here. We're coming right back with the one and the only Allum Bokhari, Managing Director for the Foundation for Freedom Online. He's going to explain to us what these repercussions could be, what the long-term outlook looks like, and what we can expect from these closed-door trial sessions that are going on in Alexandria, Virginia with Mark Zuckerberg. Keep it locked right here. It's Rich Valdez.
The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Mark Zuckerberg in a trial that could break up his social media empire as the Meta CEO faces off against the Federal Trade Commission. On Monday, the FTC focused on emails Zuckerberg and other executives sent about the purchases of Instagram and WhatsApp, including one email that said Instagram was growing so fast the company had to buy it for $1 billion. In another, Zuckerberg said the company was, quote, so far behind, adding, I worry that it will take us too long to catch up. Meta's attorney argued that Meta is not a monopoly and cited Instagram and WhatsApp as having grown substantially under Meta's ownership. Zuckerberg has been publicly and privately lobbying the Trump administration to drop the case.
I think this case absolutely is a landmark case.
Former acting U.S. Assistant Attorney General Doha Mekki.
What's the likely outcome of this trial?
It's really hard to say. This trial sets up an important question. Are we going to be the kind of place where markets are open and vibrant, or are we going to look a lot more like other countries with autocratic regimes or totalitarian regimes where there's a fusion between the state and between private monopolies.
The trial is expected to last as long as 2 months. I'm Jolene Kent.
So I want to get some reaction to that to really get the scoop on what's going on. Allum Bokhari is an amazing tech guy, in my opinion. His real title is Managing Director of the Foundation for Freedom Online. Check them out at foundationforfreedomonline.com. Allum Bokhari, welcome back.
Good evening, Rich. Good to be on.
So you heard the setup there. Zuckerberg's in for the fight of his career. And my question is, I mean, from a practical sense, when you're a rich guy like he is, very rich, you don't really lose much if you lose all this, right? It's not like he's going to be broke, but he would lose, I guess, a lot of market share and positioning if he wasn't able to keep these companies. Do you think that's the biggest problem he's facing, or is there more?
I think that's probably his biggest concern right now is this FTC antitrust trial. It could really end Facebook's dominance of social media. Now, I'm not a lawyer. From what I've read of the analysis, the legal analysis, Meta does have a good chance of winning, but they clearly cared enough about this trial and see it as big of a risk in their eyes that they lobbied the Trump administration repeatedly over the last 2 weeks to drop the trial, to settle it out of court. Zuckerberg even bought a new house just 10 minutes from the White House, so he could make regular trips to the Oval Office to lobby Trump on the matter. But interestingly, those efforts were not successful. The case went to trial today. It's going to continue at trial for the next 2 months.
Folks, we're on with Allum Bokhari, Foundation for Freedom Online. And, you know, Allum Bokhari, they're not telling us a whole lot of what's coming out of this because it's a closed trial. But I know you have a lot more friends in this industry than I do that know what's going on in the tech world. What are you hearing, and what's the speculation that you're hearing in your circles?
I'd say this the legal speculation I'm hearing from people who are, in the tech world and also in the legal world who are monitoring the case suggests that Facebook does. Meta has a reasonable chance of beating the case simply because they have competition from Snapchat and TikTok and a lot of other platforms. I think, we heard in the segment earlier that Instagram also grew under Meta's leadership. They didn't buy it to shut it down, which is a big concern that competition regulators often have with acquisitions. So it's not that Meta's sure to lose, but there's enough of a risk of them losing that it could be very, very consequential, because if Meta was forced to unwind WhatsApp and Instagram, which would be the result of them losing this case, that would lead to them losing the two healthiest parts of the Meta ecosystem, I would say, because WhatsApp and Instagram tend to be growing much faster than Facebook, and that's been true for the last several years.
Talk to us about what you think the implications are for us, for regular people that just use some of this tech. Would it be seamless for us, or would there be some sort of shock and awe on the consumer side?
Generally speaking, no. It's not like TikTok, where TikTok actually went down for a while because it was banned in the U.S. If Meta were forced to unwind those two platforms, they'd stay up and running. They'd probably just transfer to different ownership. But it wouldn't be like TikTok at all. I think WhatsApp and Instagram would continue probably in their current form for quite a while, and probably maybe even longer than that, depending on what the new owners would do with it.
Yeah. And I want to switch gears a little bit, because I know you have a fantastic website, Foundation for Freedom Online, and one of the reports that you recently published was Microsoft publishing partisan information literacy lesson plans despite assurances to senators. And it doesn't surprise me that Microsoft is, coloring outside the lines. But tell us what's going on here.
So we do a lot of research at the Foundation on what led to online censorship, which has been pervasive over the past 10 years. Really reached a peak under Biden in 21-22. And the tech companies really worked hand in glove with the censorship industry. Microsoft was really one of the worst offenders. They worked closely with a company called NewsGuard, which worked to blacklist certain news websites that they find to be
And Allum, I just want to say, this is some sort of like anti-disinformation fact checker, right?
That's correct. NewsGuard markets itself as, a watchdog of disinformation that tells you which news sources can be trusted and which ones can't. And surprise, surprise, as is often the case with, organizations claiming to be objective arbiters of disinformation, the sites they target for smears, the sites they call disinformation, the sites they tell you not to trust are often, very, very, very influential conservative news sources. So, Tucker Carlson, Breitbart News, Joe Rogan. Maybe they haven't said anything about Joe Rogan, but Tucker Carlson they certainly have. Many, many other conservative news outlets, the Federalist, Revolver, Consortium News, which is an anti-establishment, anti-war news website. They all ended up on NewsGuard's blacklist, and Microsoft was one of their earliest backers. And not only that, they tried to get so-called media literacy lessons into schools in America and recommended NewsGuard as one of the resources. So they wanted to teach America's kids not to trust these, dangerous dissident news sources. It took them a while, even after the election result, which I thought was a vote against censorship, for Microsoft to back off from that.
Allum Bokhari, I want you to let everybody know how they can support the work that you're doing at the foundation and how they can learn more about all of these, updates that you guys put out on censorship.
Yeah, come and read our reports at foundationforfreedomonline.com. You can also follow me on X at Allum Bokhari. And we'll be doing many more reports on the disinformation industry and the various organizations that fund and support online censorship.
Outstanding. Very concise, always informative. Allum Bokhari, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Rich. Always great to be on.
Likewise. Godspeed, my man. And amigos, we go to your calls, your thoughts, and reactions straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Hi, this is Mark Zuckerberg, but real ones call me the Zuck.
This video was posted on social media, and so was another video from Palo Alto that appeared to imitate another voice.
Hi, this is Elon Musk. Welcome to Palo Alto, the home of Tesla engineering. They say money can't buy happiness.
While some were surprised by it, others not so much. Were you surprised to hear that this would happen?
Not surprised. We are in the Bay Area. Anything is possible.
The city of Palo Alto says Saturday morning a city employee noted the voice announcement feature on the crosswalk at University and High Street wasn't working properly. The city later found that 12 downtown intersections were also malfunctioning and may have been tampered with on Friday. A city official says the city has disabled the audible feature until further repairs can be made. It's not clear who's behind the apparent hack or what the consequences might be if they're caught. In Palo Alto, Christy Smith, NBC Bay Area News.
That's pretty funny. Somebody hacked the crosswalk to put those guys' voices in there. And, man, you would think, why don't they do that anywhere I live? I'd love to hear something like that. Not because I'm fans of theirs, just, to break up the monotony. That's funny. Man, they've got a good sense of humor in Palo Alto. Anyway, I want to get to the news of the day with you guys, the American people, reporting to me what's going on. We got Atlanta, Georgia, Boise, Idaho, Montreal, Canada, listening online. And I want to start off here with whoever's been on hold the longest, 833-4-VALDEZ. Let's go to Todd. He's in Atlanta, Georgia, on WGKA. Todd, go right ahead.
Hey, good evening, Rich. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I was calling about the
situation in Maryland, and I think the left is just trying to set a precedent with this case. They want to try to enable all illegal alien gang members to, claim asylum, that they can't be deported because, it's dangerous for them. And, there are gang members in Maryland, too, not just El Salvador. And I think it's just a specious argument. That's like saying, if you're a Blood or a Crip or an Aryan Nation or something, or Vados Locos, no, you can't send me to jail, Judge, because there are gang members there and they're going to be mean to me. I mean, it's such a ridiculous argument. And they just
agree
want to set a precedent,
Now, let me ask you this. I agree that it's a specious argument and it's weak. And how do you get asylum when you traveled, 6, 7 different countries to get here? The question I have is, why set this precedent, and what is the benefit to the radical left of having all these gang members here? Do you think it's precisely to have gang members here, or they just love to be against Trump?
Well, they've made a hero out of Mangione for murdering, an insurance executive. So, these people are just are depraved. And like I say, they don't care about American citizens or legal immigrants that are being victimized by these gangs. They just hate Trump. And I hope the president of El Salvador deports Chris Van Hollins.
I love that. That was so good. I hope he does too. I'd love to talk about that. Maybe he could come on the show and tell us about it. Todd in Atlanta, Georgia. Excellent call. Call back anytime. I appreciate it. WGKA, Todd in Atlanta. Thank you, sir. Let me see. Where do we go from here? Well, you know what? Yeah. You know what we'll do? We will we'll take a quick pause right here so that we don't have to rush you in the speed round in the next section. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Donald Trump is a criminal who was found guilty of 34 felony counts of fraud, liable for sexual abuse. Of course he's lying and abusing and manipulating the stock market too. When he talks about rapists and criminals, he should look in the mirror.
That, of course, is AOC, all-out crazy herself. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, my least favorite congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens. And do you think she's trying to position herself for something bigger in the future? Do you think maybe she's trying to lobby her friends at The View or her friends at NASA to see if they will let her go up into almost outer space with Katy Perry and Gayle King? I don't think so. I think she's trying to become president or a vice president because she's finally old enough to run. And Bernie Sanders, her communist sympathizing grandpa, is going to be right there along her side to make sure that she gets the job done. And they make Stalin proud. AOC, all out crazy. She says Trump is this, he's that, he's all sorts of things. When you know that when they're lobbing all these things at Trump, you know they're trying to deflect. You know they're trying to try and sully him a little bit so that they can try and make a point, but they don't have a point to make. So I want to get your thoughts on this and everything else that's going on. Let me see. Let's go to Boise, Idaho. WB should be KBOI, right? Go right ahead, Paul.
Thanks for taking my call.
Yes.
Speaking of which, I think AOC's already up in the stratosphere
she just comes down every once in a while and then's called back up again.
Yeah, she's a space cadet already.
Yeah, they were both here yesterday. They were here in Boise, Idaho. They had quite a big rally.
Yeah, that clip is from Nampa, Idaho, just yesterday, where she said all those crazy things.
Yeah, and they had a ruckus. They had about 10 or 12 people that were wearing MAGA hats, and they escorted them outside the building and wouldn't let them come back in.
I think they also had about 12,000 people in attendance.
They got kicked out.
Right, but I'm saying they had a huge crowd. She seems to be very popular, her and Bernie.
Yeah, but, Theo Bruja.
Theo Bruja.
I'm sorry. When somebody talks ugly, they make them look ugly, too. So it's one of those things that they actually were here yesterday. I was surprised, and they tied up the interstate here for hours because people were just coming from all over to see them. And, I think that was good and healthy for them, that they needed to be able to see their people that they're going to support. But I would like to take this moment here to extend an invitation to Numero Uno Patriot, and that would be our Supreme Allied Commander. And I'd love to have him and his wife and his child up here to visit Idaho when he can, and it can be done. And he can see what Idaho is really like. It gets a bad rap for having white nationalists this and white nationalists that, and there may be a small section of that, but there's really, it's blown way out of proportion, which is unfortunate.
Well, I'm sure with you on the job up there, Paul, we're going to get it done, brother. Thank you for the call. Godspeed to you, my man. I got to move along because we still got Tony from Montreal on the line. Listening by way of WVMT. Go for it.
How you doing, Rich? Glad to speak to you tonight, and thanks for taking my call. Listen,
yes, sir.
I just wanted to mention one thing. Like, I know that you're always advocating for open mics, which is great. It gives us a chance. So, I want to address this thing Democrats have been pounding for, the last, 100 days, that Trump is a threat to democracy. I want to know what democracy they're talking about, because the only threat that I see Trump advocating with DOGE or Doge and Elon Musk is a threat to abuse, criminality, corruption, cash, and fighting corruption inside the government. In other words, ridding itself of the entrenched bureaucracy, which is a threat to democracy. Because when a president gets elected with the authority of 88 million people, he has the executive power to make decisions regarding direction of the country. And if he says the bureaucracy is fat and abusive and is serving a purpose that is contradictory and is contrarian to his goals, which is the goals of 88 million people, then that is not undemocratic. That is actually democratic, and that we should be subservient to an idea that corruption should be removed, and the Democrats should be supporting that, Rich.
I hear you, brother, and I think you're spot on there, Tony. Great analysis. Shout out to everybody in Canada. And amigos, we continue the conversation straight ahead. Another solid hour coming your way. Tune in at richvaldez.com. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming right back.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Your liberty-loving Latino amigo, happy to be with you this Tuesday night. It's 7 minutes after the hour. And we are live and national. If you want to join the conversation, 833-482-5337, 8334-Valdez. And all sorts of things I want to get into tonight. Of course, big announcement that we heard over the last couple of days. I should say a big tease, right? Stephen A. Smith, he was on the Sunday shows. I mentioned this yesterday, but I didn't play the audio because it's a little bit longer, and I wanted to leave enough time to do it. And he says he's got no choice but to contemplate a run for president. Now, we have all sorts of people in our country, right? We've got people, and I think it's time Americans wake up. And this is not necessarily because of what Stephen A. Smith said, but because the fact is that people want to hear what others have to say. We've got people that are for everything. You've got pro-Nazi people out there, pro-Hamas people, right? Pro-Zionist people, pro-Putin people. You got pro-war people, the war hawks. You got everybody out there, the pro-abortion crowd, the pro-life crowd, all sorts of people. There are people that are communist sympathizers that really think that that is the way to go. They've sipped that Kool-Aid. You've got some that know it doesn't work, but they know that they can manipulate others, so they go for it. Listen, there's something for everybody out there. And Stephen A. Smith realizes this. He realizes that there is a thirst for people that say things that resonate with them, that make sense. This guy's a radio guy, right? He was on this program telling me about his radio career. He's a TV guy. He understands how people work. He understands what it's like to connect with an audience. He's a strong communicator. I like Stephen A. Smith. I don't always agree with the guy, but I think he's solid. And I don't know that, the Democrats get behind him, right? I don't know that he has the gravitas for that party. And I don't think he has the gravitas for the Republican Party either, because I think he really is moderate and centrist on a lot of issues. But I think he's a voice that people will resonate with a lot more than they resonate with Gavin Newsom. But he's also trying to fill, the same void. And Bernie Sanders is filling the fringe void. The healthcare is the right. You're tired of the government taking money? Are you tired of people, you working hard and they're just taking your money, going wars, foreign wars, right? Everybody, as long as you point the finger at another bad guy, you're able to get people to join your club. But here's what Stephen A. Smith had to say when he was on This Week with George Stephanopoulos.
People have walked up to me, including my own pastor, for crying out loud, who has said to me, you don't know what God has planned for you. At least show the respect to the people who believe in you, who respect you, who believe that you can make a difference in this country, to leave the door open for any possibilities 2 to 3 years down the line. And that's what I've decided to do. But again, whether it's Governor Westmore, who I know, or Governor Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania, who I know, Andrew Cuomo, who I had the pleasure of interviewing, who's trying to get back in things and be the next mayor of New York, etc. I see a lot of people that obviously and clearly are more qualified than me. But in the same breath, when you think about what Trump is getting away with, when you think about what you brought up about Steve Bannon, who's trying to be slick because he's looking at a non-political individual like myself, looking at me as a populist. But you better be careful what you ask for, because some of the stuff that Trump and the right has been trying to get away with, like circumventing the 22nd Amendment of the Constitution, talking about how there could be a third term. Excuse me, be careful what you wish for, because if any GOP member, if any Republican supports that, I don't want to hear a word out of their mouth ever again about following the Constitution, the Constitution. That's what they've been living off for years. And then you're talking about circumventing the 22nd Amendment, and you think that's cool? No way. That's not something that we should stand for. So I would hope somebody else would step up that's more qualified than me. But if it has to come down to me, it is something I would consider. Yes, I would, because I don't mind the thought of tussling with these folks at all, on the left or the right.
There you go. Stephen A. Smith sounds like he's ready to throw his hat into the ring for POTUS, staring down the barrel of a fight with J.D. Vance potentially, with Marco Rubio potentially, with there's so many good contenders on the Republican side. I don't know. I don't know. It sounds like a way better election cycle than this last one, honestly. Trump wiped the floor with everybody. And kind of, we all knew that was going to happen. I'm pretty certain that, we didn't see Tim Walz, marching his way over to the Naval Observatory. Kamala Harris wasn't going to be getting sworn in. But these guys, it's everybody's going to be running, right? It's not there is no incumbent. It's going to be an open field. And I'm curious to see. You've got some good debaters, some really good smooth talkers. Stephen A. Smith, very plain spoken, knows how to very eloquent, knows how to communicate the ideas and emotions that he's feeling. He's very solid. So can't wait. I can't wait to see this stuff go down. But that's where we are with that. And I wonder how that materializes, what happens from there. Anyway, some of the other things we're looking at today, because there was a bunch of things in the news. The feds arrested a guy for threatening to assassinate DNI Tulsi Gabbard. Thank God they got that whack job. And, of course, cue the conspiracy people to say it was a false flag. It was MK Ultra. It was not real. The whole thing is a hoax. Okay, thank you. Next. Trump is skipping the 2025 White House Correspondents' Dinner. Got it. Let's see what else we got here. The White House is asking Congress to cut $9 billion for PBS and USAID. I love that. That'll probably end up in court, and hopefully El Trompito will score another win. People are very upset. Because of Trump winning, and people are very upset because Trump is getting people to the table. They're so upset they've been silent, right? Now, I understand that it's Passover and people are out, but I don't hear anybody screaming anymore about the markets. I don't hear anybody screaming anymore about things are going to cost more. They've moved on to cheering on Luigi Mangione, right? Saying, look, we like the fact that this guy killed somebody. This guy's good. He's a real man. Real men kill people, right? That's how the left looks at these things. You're a real man when you can kill somebody. Just like the left within the Democrat Party, the real extreme left, right? The Weather Underground back in the 60s or back in the 50s in Puerto Rico, the independence movement in Puerto Rico, the nationalists that wanted to separate separatists from, they want to, secessionists, basically. The Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis of Puerto Rico, Lolita Lebron and Pedro Arbizu. These guys, she went to Congress and shot members of Congress. He led the revolt in Jayuya against the police department, taking over a police station back in the 50s. And when it's reported, oftentimes, it's reported as, revolutionaries, freedom fighters, some sort of euphemistic positive spin on the fact that they took over a police station and tried to take over a country. An actual armed insurrection. 60 or 70 people. It was like a small army. And when the United States actually sent in the army and dropped some bombs, they were shocked that they were shooting people and bombing people. I mean, what do you think is going to happen if you attack the police? Well, I guess they thought what happened in Oregon in 2020, right? Or in Washington. You can't live a life without these types of consequences, where everything's allowed, where you're allowed to just take over police departments, create autonomous zones, break things, bomb federal buildings, shoot members of Congress. That's not allowed. I can't believe I have to say that out loud, but it's not. You're not allowed to do it. And I feel silly saying that. But that's the situation that I feel we're in. You've got the media begging for MS-13 gang members to be deported. You got members of the United States Senate from Maryland, Chris Van Hollen, saying he wants to go and bail this guy out himself. I mean, the level of ridiculousness that we're experiencing right now is pretty serious stuff. So I want to get into more of that with you guys. I see we have calls from Texas, from Wisconsin, from other parts of the country coming in right now. But I also want to talk about something that I saw in the New York Times. There's an article in the Times that says that there is new developments with ADHD, and there's another report out there that says people with ADHD, and everybody here knows somebody with ADHD, even if it's just me, they say that you actually might not live as long. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I just have to thank you for doing what you do every night and opening up that mic and hearing from Americans, letting them express their opinions, and really giving people a voice. So God bless you for what you're doing, my friend.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Is ADHD medication safe? So there are hundreds and hundreds of studies that have shown over decades that ADHD medication is both generally safe and also pretty effective. It's important to get an accurate diagnosis by a trusted professional if they appropriately prescribe the medication, if you take it as it has been prescribed. When you put it all together, ADHD medication can actually improve safety outcomes by helping with impulsivity and distractibility, and to just make you more aware of the world around you.
That's Dr. Ari Tuckman. And there is a new study out that talks about this in particular. There is questions about whether or not ADHD meds work for everyone the same way. New study reveals why it doesn't. And I find this stuff to be interesting. Now, I want to bring in somebody who knows a lot about this stuff because he's a pro. And then once we talk about that, we're going to talk about the overall life expectancy in the next segment. You know him on this program. He's a regular here. Dr. Vince Callahan, welcome back, sir.
Thank you so much for having me. I love being on your show.
Thank you, brother. I love having you on the show. You're a wealth of information, and the audience loves you. And, Doc, I'm looking at this piece. It's in newatlas.com. I'm trying to see which study they're talking about. But there is this study out, and there's really a number of them, but there's one that's more recent than others. It was co-led by the University of Maryland School of Medicine and the National Institutes of Health. And they what they're finding is that the amount of dopamine produced by Ritalin in a person used to help them predict whether they would have the right level of attention and performance. But what they find is that it's more complicated than that. The study led to additional information, blah, 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 blah. I'm trying to skip ahead here. They found that the types of dopamine receptors on the brain cells and the ratio in which they found them were better predicted in other areas like cognitive performance. So inconclusive as to, why, at least from what I'm getting, why exactly it works better for some people than others, but they know that it works better for some than others. And I would think that seems to be common sense with most medicine, I think, is like that. But Doc, what's your experience with this? I know you do a lot of CBT and you have a lot of experience working with kids in schools. And of course, those kids in schools that may present with ADHD become adults like me with ADHD.
Right. Well, the biggest issue is whether or not you're being properly diagnosed, because a lot of people, and I say a lot several times, who think people who thought they had ADHD don't really have it. And there's always a telltale sign. I had a patient one time who I told her, go to her general doctor, get one Ritalin tablet, and take it 20 minutes before you come see me for therapy. She said, okay, I'll do that. She walked into my office, and the first question she asked me was, when did you put the pictures up on the wall? And I said, 6 months ago. She said, no way, I've never seen them. What Ritalin does, it's actually speed. And when you have an ADD or ADHD brain, what's happening in your brain is it's processing information so fast that the Ritalin, or Adderall now is one they use, it has the reverse effect and slows the processing down of the brain that's happening so fast. And so that's why it works with some people and it doesn't work with others, because those that it doesn't work on, very simply, probably don't have ADHD.
Oh, very interesting. So what do you recommend for others? Now, I'll tell you, I tried different stimulants, and they weren't for me. I felt overstimulated by them, and I found the non-stimulant Strattera to work outstanding. It was fantastic for me, but caused my blood pressure to go up, and I had to take higher and higher dosages of it to maintain its effectiveness. So I kind of did away with it. And through diet and exercise and a bunch of other things, I've learned to manage a lot of my crazy leg shaking and my head going all over the place, to the point where I feel more normal. I don't think it makes me more normal, but I definitely feel a little bit more normal. And what's interesting is the stuff that RFK Jr., Bobby Kennedy, Secretary Kennedy from the HHS, that he talks about red dyes and whatnot. I can tell you, somebody told me about that and how the effects that had, and I started to eliminate a lot of that from my diet. And I can tell you, I definitely felt a lot calmer after doing that. And now I only do it like before I go to the gym. I'll have some of those red gummies and whatnot, and you definitely get pumped up. At least I do. And I know maybe it's psychosomatic, who knows? But I felt the difference when I removed them from my diet. So what are your thoughts on how diet and exercise integrate into all of this?
I think it's a huge part. I think we don't pay attention to what we're really putting in our bodies. Unfortunately, we just kind of go through life doing instead of really considering what we're actually doing and putting stuff into our bodies. And just like with diabetes, you can change most things with diet and exercise. That's the way our bodies are made. And that's the way that our brains are made. Our brains need fat in our diet. Our brain is 60% fat, and it needs cholesterol, which is fat. It needs that to operate at a high rate. So, yeah, we need to pay a whole lot more attention to what we're putting in the body and what we're doing instead of just being a slug on the wall and not really paying attention to it.
Yeah, folks, we're on with Dr. Vince Callahan. That's drvincecallahan.com. He's the founder of the Florida Institute for Neural Discovery, FIND-FL.com, FIND-FL. And you can always go to his website, drvincecallahan.com. And Dr. Vince, straight ahead, I want to get your take on another story that's out in the New York Times, and other outlets are reporting this, that life expectancy could be a little bit lower for those with ADHD because of a multitude of reasons. So stick with me, Doc. We're coming right back, folks, with Dr. Vince Callahan, one of my favorite psychologists that he just knows exactly what to say and when to say it. Don't go anywhere, folks. Rich Valdez coming right back with Dr. Vince Callahan.
Well, you, of course, have a track record now. People have heard you, and they know that, in fact, you've got the goods. You have the talent, and you have the ability to do a superb job.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
This is some disturbing news for adults with ADHD, and new studies suggest that they have shorter lifespans. Dr. Malika Marshall is here. Doctor, adult ADHD getting a lot of attention now.
Yes, and for good reason.
Right.
Because according to the CDC, about 6% of American adults carry a diagnosis of ADHD, but most aren't identified until they reach adulthood. Well, now a study of more than 30,000 adults with ADHD in the UK has found that their life expectancy is significantly shorter than that for people in the general population, almost 7 years shorter for men, nearly 9 years for women. They say people with ADHD on average tend to be poorer, have lower achievement in school and work, worse physical and mental health, and a higher risk of substance use, risky behaviors, and suicidality, all of which can contribute to premature death, but could be addressed with proper care and attention. Now, they say the study only included adults actually diagnosed with ADHD and may not apply to the entire population of adults with ADHD because many of those have not even been diagnosed.
I didn't understand that last sentence, but whatever. I'll take the first few sentences anyway. You may not know you have ADHD, but you've got it, and it's undiagnosed. Thank you so much. Dr. Vince Callahan is our guest, and the bottom line here, those adults that know they have ADHD may be facing a shorter life expectancy if they don't do the right thing. Dr. Vince, what do you make of this?
The issue here is impulsivity. Unless you are on the right medication and treating your ADHD, one of the greatest things that you deal with in this case is the impulse control that you don't have. And so here, shorter lifespan for untreated ADD or ADHD folks is going to hinge on impulsivity. That's why you have a higher suicide rate. That's why you have lower socioeconomic income. That's why you have lower health things for your life and taking care of yourself. All that because of your impulse control, your lack of impulse control. So that's what meds really do for the ADD brain, is help control those impulses and help work some of that prefrontal cortex and temporal lobe communication so that you are less impulsive.
Now, Doc, there's been a lot of discussion over the years from people, and again, people from various camps, right? You've got people who say, you know what, it's a crutch, stop making excuses, there's nothing wrong with you, you're just lazy, and now we're trying to diagnose lazy. Then you've got other people that say, you know, the exact opposite. Oh, these people can't do anything. There's no way they could ever hold a job. There's no way they could ever be on time. There's no way they could ever pay a parking ticket. That these people are going to have to be supported by the government. Put them on permanent disability, get them SSI, and let's call it a day. And then I think you've got people in between that are, you know, just skeptical overall. What do you say to those people?
Well, I say, first of all, that ADD or ADHD is a neurological disorder that has to do with information processing, the speed at which your brain processes the data. And there are lots of things like aggression and concentration and fidgeting and forgetting things and all those, you know, impulsivity and all those things. So what I say to that is, if you treat it like you should, you can live a normal, productive life. If you don't treat it, you're going to be like the people that saying you're going to go around that same old mountain over and over and over again, only it's going to spiral worse as you get older. That's what I say.
Yeah, and you know, Dr. Vince Callahan, there's been talk over the years of renaming ADHD a deficit of executive function as opposed to attention or hyperactivity, because of the deepness of how this affects the brain, where it's not just distractibility, but it's also emotional dysregulation. It's really, like you said, impulse control, but overall that kind of lack of executive function, where you know you got to do this, but you don't do this. And this, I think, is a source of debate for a lot of people, because some say, nah, that's just kids that are restless and they need energy to burn and they're being diagnosed and over-medicated, which I believe does happen. I think there's a lot of kids that are rambunctious and whatnot, and they're like, yep, give them some Ritalin. I think that happens. But I think there's some of those kids grow up to be adults that find themselves not like other adults and say, oh, one of these things is not like the other.
Absolutely. And you can actually diagnose a true ADD child at the age of 2. You have the symptoms at the age of 2 years of age that will stay throughout if they truly have ADD.
What do those look like from your experience?
Well, they look like children who can't stand in the line correctly. They've got to go to the front of the line. That looks like children who are very irritable, very aggressive with their classmates. You've got children that can't wait until you get to answer the questions. They've got to jump in and blurt it out. They do not sit still at all. They are always in movement. But here again, you've got to look at there's a possibility of autism, because movement is connected to autism. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. And right now, what research is trying to do is to put ADD and ADHD on the same scale as autism and Asperger's.
I've read about that, and I've seen some of the similarities. What are your thoughts on that? I guess there is some overlap between the two, but I think there's a lot of difference as well. Your thoughts?
I think there's a lot of difference. I don't have a problem if we're going to put ADD on the lower side of the autistic scale, and if we're going to move it like a color timeline where you're getting more progressive neurologically. I don't have a problem with that. But I think, again, we've really got to do a better job at diagnosing these kids and adults. And once we get the right cocktail for their brain, they can thrive in life. They don't have to just survive.
Really well put. Now, Dr. Vince, I want you to let everybody know how they can get in touch with you, how they could hear more from you, and learn more about FIND, the Florida Institute for Neural Discovery.
Sure, I'll tell you three things real quick. Number one, tomorrow at noon on Facebook, I'm doing my first Facebook Live show. I'm going to start doing that 15 minutes on every Wednesday at noon. It's called On the Couch with Dr. Callahan. Number two, I've got a textbook coming out on the stress brain called Freedom to Change. It'll be in stores in July. And number three, they can go to our website, drvincecallahan.com. There's an office number on there they can call, and they can fill out a form. And if they want to talk to me, I'll be glad to answer my phone and talk to them.
On the Couch with Dr. Callahan. I think that's a great title. I love it. Folks, make sure you check out all of those, and you can find out more at Dr. Vince Callahan, drvincecallahan.com. Doc, I always appreciate you having you on and your conversation and your advice. It's always warranted, and it's always very valuable. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for what you do, and thank you for having me on the show. And I really appreciate your voice in the nighttime, and I've listened to your show, and you're doing a great job, and I just appreciate you as well.
Oh, God bless you, sir. Thank you for that. I really do appreciate it. And happy Easter to you.
You too.
All right, amigos, we continue straight ahead with your calls. We've got calls from Montana, Chicago, Alabama, Texas, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
After the guest leaves every night and we're doing open phones, kind of at the heartbeat of America. And you sit there in this radio studio and suddenly you hear voices. Mobile, Dallas, New York, Miami. And there's kind of a conglomeration of America all in one room.
Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Here, Fox's Jennifer Griffin did confirm this. This was first reported by Reuters that top Pete Hegseth advisor Dan Caldwell was escorted from the building and is being investigated for quote-unquote unauthorized disclosure of classified information. So Fox can confirm the Reuters reporting is accurate, but the statement from the Pentagon to Fox says we do not comment on ongoing investigations.
So that is a report, of course, from Fox News there, what is going on with the Pentagon. I want to get your thoughts and reactions to that, as well as the legal case against the illegal alien from El Salvador that was deported, and everything else that you want to bring to the table. I see we have calls coming in from all over the place. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Let's go to Robert, Athens, Alabama, WVNN. Go right ahead.
Yeah, man, I like your show. First time I got to talk to you.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'm really happy about Pete. You know, he was put there to do a job, and he's doing his job, so that's really great. And, you know, the person down there that's going to go, the judge, he's going to go down there and get him out of there. Well, you know, he's going to find out he can't.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yeah, well, I have no idea what's going to happen there. I would imagine that that's going to be the outcome, but you never know, right? Everything, it's never a dull moment in Washington, D.C., Robert. I think you're 100% right. Thanks for your call, brother. I appreciate it. Shout out to everybody in Athens, Alabama, WVNN. And this thing with the judge is interesting. This thing with the wife and her I was going to call it a pep rally. Her press conference today, I think, just continues to add some fuel to the fire of what is actually going on. Let's go to Marco, Chicago, Illinois, WLS. Marco, your thoughts?
Hi, Rich. Second time calling, man. I love the show.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, man. From one Boricua to another.
Huepa.
Listen, I just had I just had a question for you. I keep hearing what it started to sound to me like talking points about this Venezuelan guy that this father and married
Oh,
a
the
guy
El Salvadorian guy, yeah.
Sent. Right. Okay. So they keep saying two courts determined that this gentleman was a MS-13 gang member, but he never got convicted here. I agree. I'm not advocating for this guy. I agree with almost everything that Trump is doing. My question is, if he didn't get convicted, why did he get sent to a prison down there?
Right. So, in effect, really what happens here is he was deported. He's in prison because he was always going to be in prison in his own country for crimes that he's committed there. Right. So that's where this whole thing gets tricky. And that's what they were asking the president yesterday in the White House, President Bukele. This guy, because of his known gang affiliation in El Salvador, is the reason why he's in trouble over there. If he's not being held for us, is my point, right? He's now in the custody of El Salvador, and they're choosing to keep him in jail for whatever it is he's done. And this was the reason that his asylum was approved, even though it was erroneously approved, right? That was an error to approve it. But he was saying, if you send me back to El Salvador, I'm going to jail, because he was a wanted man in El Salvador. And he said, and the gangs are going to kill me. And I don't know his rationale for why the gangs would kill him, but he knew he was going to jail. That was 100% going to happen, and he knew that. So that's the reason he's in jail. He's not in jail because we put him in jail. He's only been deported. He went with guys that we also put in jail that Venezuela wouldn't take back. And that was where this whole administrative oversight happened, where he should have had an additional court date in the United States where they were going to tell him, sir, you don't have asylum anymore. It was given to you erroneously, and you're going to be deported. So the outcome would have been the same anyway. And, now the ball is in President Bukele's court. The court has ruled that Trump can't do anything about this except bring him back if he's released by President Bukele, who said he won't be releasing him. So it's really a moot point, ultimately, right? We're not punishing him for anything other than being in the country illegally and having known gang affiliations tied to human trafficking. And for that reason, he was deported. His jail is on him because he was always going to go to jail, and even he knew that, which is why he applied for asylum, if that makes any sense. Marco, thank you for your call, my brother. I appreciate it. Boricuas in the house, Chicago, Illinois, WLS. And let me see. Yeah, I'll take a pause right here. We're coming right back. Montana. Let's see. Some state that I don't have on my screen. Tyler, Texas, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, we've got Geiger in Akron, Ohio. Looks like the deep state got him. Let's go to Blake in Tyler, Texas. KLIF. Go right ahead.
Rich, I want to speak to the topic we've just been discussing here about Bragado Garcia, that he was deported down there to El Salvador, and he was deported because he was an illegal alien that was here supposedly on a parole because he hasn't been found to be a citizen of the United States. Well, we have a judge that has made a ruling that she calls an order. And I just don't know how a judge can take what they make as a ruling and create an order that would go to the Department of Justice, which is in a different branch, and demand information about the return of the person that was deported, and without having without regard to the fact that the executive branch issues orders, judges issue rulings, and if whatever court issues a ruling, the executive officer always has the pejorative to be able to override the ruling and issue an order.
Well, let me jump in here. So I think I get what you're saying, and I think what's happening here is this: two things, right? Part of this is semantics, right? So when a judge rules on something, it's an order, right? The paper says order by way of the court. It's an order of the court that it's been ordered by Judge so and so and so and so that therefore be it ordered blah 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 blah, and they order what's going on. The relief that they sought, right, and the reason that they think that they can do this because at the district level they brought the case there. Because this happened, wherever it happened in that area, right? And they went to the judge in that area. So they say, all right, look, here's our problem. We have a problem with the federal government. We think the federal government is overstepping their bounds. We're suing the federal government. We're seeking relief from the court. So the court says, all right, I'm going to step in. The court's not going to say, hey, I don't handle lawsuits where you sue the federal government because they have the final say, because they don't. They're going to say, all right, let's take a look at this. And they weigh the merits of the case. The problem here is that this judge in a district court was going beyond his scope, and the Supreme Court acknowledged that, and also acknowledged that there's nothing that can be done, and that Trump was 100%, the Trump administration was 100% within their rights to deport this person with the limited due process because this person was identified by two federal courts as fitting the description of a member of a foreign terrorist organization. So that's the issue there. You're right in that foreign policy and immigration and all of that falls within the purview of the federal government. Sure, absolutely. But even when the Republicans sued Biden over different things, they sued him in federal court, and that's the avenue that you've got to go through to get to those places. Blake, thank you for your call. Shout out to KLIF, Tyler, Texas. Jane in Chicago, Illinois, thank you for your call. Frank in Evergreen, Montana, thank you for your call. Everybody else on hold, thank you for your calls and for waiting. Hasta la próxima. Until the next time, America, take care, good night, and God bless you. I'm Rich Valdez.